Cutting ties isn't a decision, it's a wound. It's the kind of pain that doesn't bleed on the outside, but corrodes on the inside, slowly, silently, rationally. And the most curious thing is that sometimes the cut doesn't come from anger. It comes from lucidity, because there's a moment in life when love is no longer enough and respect becomes a matter of survival. No one teaches you how to distance yourself from the person who gave you your last name, the childhood hug, the plate of food. But time teaches harshly that some family ties aren't bonds, they're shackles. They're cycles that repeat themselves under the excuse of blood, but that drain energy, peace, and self-esteem. And when the mind starts to realize this, something changes forever. Seneca wrote that the wise man is he who recognizes when virtue demands distance. And perhaps this is one of the most difficult virtues, the courage not to remain where the soul sickens. That's what this video is about. About the act of cutting ties, not with anger but with clarity. About understanding that there are loves that only survive at a distance, and that sometimes the greatest gesture of love is precisely to walk away. You will understand the 5 levels of conscious detachment from the moment the perception that something is wrong is born to the final point, when silence ceases to be defense and becomes reconstruction. You will understand that self-respect is not selfishness. It's the last shelter before losing your sanity, and you will realize that the true cut is not physical, it's emotional. It's when the other person's voice no longer has power over you. Imagine someone who spends years trying to please a mother who is never satisfied, or the son who always returns to the father who criticizes him at every meeting, or the brother who only calls when he needs something. There comes a time when the heart gets tired and silence becomes healthier than any conversation. Marcus Aurelius said that nothing is more important than keeping one's own mind in harmony. Cutting ties is often protecting that harmony. It's understanding that gratitude for the past doesn't oblige you to endure the present. This video is not about hate. It's about limits, healing, and rebirth. About the art of leaving without carrying guilt. About the process of looking back without wishing for revenge, and about the power to move forward, even when the heart still tries to look back. The purpose of this video is simple and human, to help you understand at what point in the journey you are, and to show that each stage has a meaning, from awareness to restart. So before we continue, I want to invite you to something. Take a deep breath. Think of someone with whom the bond has been heavy, and answer here in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? Perhaps today, more than ever, it's important to remember that geography changes, but self-love is the same in any city. Let's walk together, from weight to peace, from the bond that suffocates to the silence that heals. Level 1. Awareness. It all starts with a discomfort that you can't explain. A feeling of tiredness that is not physical, but moral. A conversation that always ends the same way. A family lunch that leaves a bitter taste. Or a visit that makes you leave more empty than when you arrived. This is how the first level begins. Awareness. Awareness is the moment when you see without wanting to, when you suddenly realize that something is wrong, that the bond that once gave you security now holds you back. And the mind tries to deny it. After all, it's family, it's blood, it's history. But the body feels it before reason understands. The chest tightens, the stomach revolts, the energy drops, and you begin to understand that love can exist alongside exhaustion. Seneca said that no one is free while fearing to disappoint. And perhaps that's the point. The fear of disappointing is the first sign of prison. You feel that you need to hide parts of yourself to be accepted, that you can't say what you think without being ridiculed, that you need to be small to fit into the world of others. That's when the heart begins to understand that something is out of place. Imagine a woman who, every time she visits her mother, returns home feeling guilty. The mother doesn't shout, doesn't offend. She just uses sharp words disguised as advice. You never do enough. You should be more like your brother. If I died today, you would regret it. And she returns in silence, carrying the guilt as if carrying a cross. Until the day she realizes, true love doesn't demand suffering as proof. Or think of a man who tries to maintain a bond with his father. He calls, visits, talks, tries to please, but the father never looks with tenderness, only with judgment. You still don't have your own house? At your age, I already had 3 children. You're not man enough. And one day he realizes that voice that always hurt him is no longer authority, it's noise. And silence begins to seem more comfortable than contact. Awareness is that, an inner call. It's when the heart finally admits what the mind always knew. When you realize that it is what it is no longer an excuse, it's surrender, and what was once a natural coexistence becomes a routine of wear and tear. You still love, but you start to love from a distance, within your own mind. Epictetus taught that the first step to freedom is realizing that something imprisons you. This is the first level, the moment the blindfold falls. There is still no decision, nor enough courage to cut. But there is something new, lucidity. And lucidity is like the morning light. It shows what has always been there, but that the night hid. Awareness hurts, because it shows the naked truth. And no one cuts a tie without first going through this confrontation. Why do I keep trying what always hurts me? This is the question that awakens. And from it, nothing is ever the same again. Level 2. Testing boundaries. After awareness comes the first visible movement, testing boundaries. This is where detachment ceases to be thought and begins to transform into behavior. It's when the person, for the first time, dares to say, "I can't now," and feels the weight of the other person's silence. It's the moment when the mind realizes that each exposed limit is, in fact, a mirror that reveals intentions. Until now, love was blind, but now it begins to see. And this vision is uncomfortable because it reveals what was previously accepted without realizing that many bonds only existed because you never positioned yourself. Testing boundaries is the first form of self-respect, and curiously, it's also the first trigger of rejection that you will face. Imagine a daughter who since childhood learned to solve everything for her parents, paid bills, organized things, carried the guilt of others, until one day, exhausted, she replies, "Today I can't help, I need to take care of myself." Silence. And in place of understanding comes the poison. "Oh, changed now? Think you're better than us?" And she realizes, love that depends on servitude is not love, it's control. Or think of a man who grew up hearing that masculinity was obedience. That being a good son was to endure, to be silent, never to oppose. But now he begins to test small boundaries, refuses a family meeting that always ends in humiliation, decides not to respond to messages that require unnecessary explanations, and begins to notice a pattern. The more he respects himself, the more he is accused of being selfish. He hasn't changed. He just stopped being the character that others needed to feel comfortable. Seneca said that whoever does not set limits loses the government of himself. And that's exactly what this level teaches. Limit is the first form of emotional sovereignty, and there is no self-control without the courage to displease. Because every limit will expose a truth. There are people who only loved you while you were easy to use. Epictetus also warned, if you want to be free, start by refusing what imprisons you. But refusing what imprisons you hurts, especially when that something has the face of someone you love. You say, "I can't talk now," and the other interprets it as rejection. You avoid a meeting, and the other calls you ungrateful. The simple act of preserving yourself is seen as betrayal, and that's when guilt appears, like an old ghost that tries to pull you back into the usual role. Testing boundaries is a phase of silence and observation. You begin to notice who respects you and who measures you by usefulness. The masks fall. Some move away naturally, others approach with even more control. But now you already see the games clearly. That passive-aggressive phrase that used to hurt you now sounds like a distant echo. You understand the mechanism, and that gives you power. Marcus Aurelius said that peace comes when we stop wishing that others act differently. And testing boundaries is that, the beginning of peace. You stop trying to change the other and start positioning yourself in your own center. You no longer need to explain, justify, or beg for understanding. You just move. And this silent movement begins to redesign the entire dynamic. Think of how many times you apologized for feeling too much, for wanting distance, for needing silence. How many times you tried to be understood when, in fact, you only needed to understand yourself. Testing boundaries is the moment when this inversion happens. You stop seeking approval and start seeking coherence. And here, I ask you, when was the last time you said no without justifying yourself? How many people would love you the same way if you stopped giving in? These answers are the map that shows you where the bond ends and where you begin. The second level is liberating but lonely, because the more you position yourself, the fewer people remain. But it's in this space of silence that something new is born, emotional independence. And it's exactly that that will prepare you for the next stage, that of partial distance, where the body begins to go away, but the heart still tries to stay. Level 3, partial distance. Partial distance is the emotional purgatory of those who have decided to leave, but have not yet managed to go completely. It's the moment when the mind has already understood everything, but the heart continues to try to negotiate. You know that the bond is heavy. You know that the environment makes you sick, but you still return, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of love. And each return is an emotional relapse. This is the level of ambivalence. You try to distance yourself, but you feel guilty. You avoid messages, but you open your cell phone just to see if the other person sent one. You refuse an invitation, but you spend the rest of the day wondering if you were too harsh. Partial distance is a silent battlefield, reason and affection fighting in the same body. Seneca wrote that, "It is impossible to heal by remaining in the environment that causes the disease. But the human mind is stubborn. It creates excuses, rationalizations, imaginary bridges. This time, it will be different. It's my family, I can't disappear. Maybe I'm exaggerating." And so you return. And every time you return, you feel the same cycle repeating itself. The same words, the same climate, the same emptying. Hope diminishes, and the silence between you grows like an invisible wall. Imagine a woman who decided to stop answering calls from her brother who only looks for her to complain about life. For a few days, she feels relief, sleeps better, breathes better. But the following week, guilt comes like a tide. What if he really needs me? So she answers. And in 10 minutes, she returns to feeling the old weight. She realizes that the call was not about love, it was about transferring pain, and the cycle repeats itself. Or a man who always returns to family gatherings, even knowing that he will leave irritated. He convinces himself that it's better to avoid conflicts and remain silent during dinner. But when he returns home, he feels his body heavy, as if he had betrayed his own peace. He understands that coexistence has become theater, and that continuing to pretend is the same as getting sick in slow motion. Partial distance is cruel because it mixes longing with lucidity. You remember the good times and try to use them as justification for the present, but the past is not an excuse for current suffering. Maturity begins when you understand that you can honor history without continuing to be tied to it. Epictetus said that freedom is the ability to choose what depends on us. And that's what this level teaches you, that self-respect is a daily choice, and that distancing yourself, even partially, is already an act of courage. But courage doesn't mean absence of pain. It means acting despite it. You start to measure contacts. You respond less. You say what is necessary. You learn to say, "I'm not available today." And you realize that each small gesture of self-care is an invisible victory. To outsiders, it seems coldness, but inside, it's survival. The most difficult thing is to deal with the internal voice that still tries to blame you, the one that says, "But it's your mother, it's your father, it's your blood." But blood, by itself, does not sustain respect. Blood is biology, respect is choice, and love, when healthy, does not ask for constant sacrifice. Marcus Aurelius said that the soul gets sick when it pretends to be well. And that's what you begin to understand, that pretending that everything is fine only prolongs the suffering. Partial detachment is the laboratory of courage, the rehearsal of liberation. It's here that you begin to train absence, to deal with the emptiness without trying to fill it with the same thing that hurt you. And one day, without fanfare, you realize that you've already been away longer than near, that the silence once uncomfortable now brings peace, that the cell phone can ring and you simply let it ring. The mind begins to detach, the body relaxes, and the weight dissolves. It's the harbinger of the next step. The total cut, the most feared moment, but also the most liberating. Level 4, the total cut. The total cut doesn't happen overnight. It is prepared by dozens of silent disappointments, by small resignations, by that growing feeling that it's no longer possible. And the inevitable moment arrives, that of real separation. It's no longer about distancing yourself for a week or responding to fewer messages. It's the end of the active bond, the point at which you understand that continuing to try is betraying yourself. Seneca wrote, "Nothing is more cruel than remaining in something that has already ended inside you." And that's what the total cut represents, the instant when love transforms into distant compassion and attachment gives way to serenity. Cutting is an act of respect, not for the other, but for yourself. It's the recognition that you have already given everything you could, and that love, when it insists on surviving where there is disrespect, becomes self-abandonment. The cut hurts. It's a mourning without flowers, without ceremony, without farewell. You miss something that still exists, but that you can no longer frequent. It's a type of living death, the death of the illusion that one day that would be light again. Imagine a daughter who, after years of emotional manipulation, finally decides to block her mother on her cell phone. Not out of hatred, but out of exhaustion. For days, she cries. She feels guilty. She feels the weight of the word ingratitude. But after some time, the crying turns into silence, and the silence into relief. She realizes that for the first time, she slept without anxiety, and she understands that loving from a distance is also loving. Or a man who always forgave the absent father, who sought him on every holiday, trying to rebuild something that never existed. One day, he stops trying. He deletes the number, doesn't call anymore, doesn't send a message on his birthday. And the father, proud, interprets the silence as disrespect. But deep down, the son knows, true respect begins when you refuse to continue hurting yourself. Epictetus said, "What hurts you is not what they do to you, but what you accept to continue allowing." And cutting is that, stopping allowing. It's the coldest and most loving decision someone can make at the same time, because the total cut doesn't come from anger, it comes from lucidity. Anger shouts. Lucidity just closes the door and walks in silence. In the beginning there is guilt, then emptiness. But over time something new emerges. Peace, a silent peace, almost strange. You realize that the world continues, that the air seems lighter, that time expands, and that perhaps mature love is the one that knows how to recognize the limit between caring and destroying oneself. Marcus Aurelius wrote that noble, is the man who understands when the cycle has ended. The total cut is the apex of that nobility. It's the acceptance of impermanence, the recognition that even the most sacred bonds can get sick, and that sometimes the only way to preserve respect is to withdraw. The cut doesn't erase love. It purifies it. It transforms it into remembrance, into silent gratitude, into learning. The love that needed to leave still exists. It just stopped hurting. And that is one of the highest forms of freedom. The man or woman who gets here is no longer the same. There is something different in the look, a calm that comes from within, a certainty that no longer needs to be explained. But the process is not over yet. After the cut comes the most delicate terrain, the reconstruction of oneself, the moment when you learn to live without the weight of guilt and rediscover who you are without the other. Level 5. Self-reconstruction. After the cut comes the emptiness. And for a while the emptiness scares. It's like an old house that has become too silent. You walk through the rooms of the mind and miss the noises, even those that hurt you. But it is precisely in this silence that the fifth and last level begins: self-reconstruction. Reconstruction doesn't happen in a grandiose way. It's subtle, almost imperceptible. It begins in the simple act of waking up without the weight of obligation, of not having to justify one's own rest, of being able to exist without having to explain the reason for the absence. Little by little, loneliness ceases to be a threat and becomes a sacred space. Seneca said that whoever finds company in himself is never alone. And that's what starts to happen here. You start to be enough for yourself, not as isolation, but as emotional independence. You realize that you no longer need a bond to validate who you are. And that, for the first time, silence doesn't hurt, it heals. Imagine a woman who, after breaking up with her family, spends her first Christmas alone. She prepares a simple dinner, puts on soft music, and lights a candle. In the beginning, she feels her heart tighten, but as time passes, she notices something new: the absence of tension, of demands, of pretense. For the first time in years, the night is peaceful. And she understands that loneliness and peace are not opposites, they are close relatives. Or a man who has always lived trying to prove something to his father. After the cut, he decides to travel alone. On any afternoon, sitting by the sea, he sees his own reflection in the waves. There is no more guilt, no more anger, just a feeling of lightness. He finally understands that he no longer needs to be what the other expected. It is enough to be whole. Epictetus said, "Freedom is not in fleeing from others, but in not being a slave to their expectations." And that's the essence of this last level. You stop fighting against the past and start building the future from your own presence. The energy that was previously spent trying to maintain bonds is now invested in cultivating internal roots. You read more, sleep better, talk to fewer people, but with more depth. The circle narrows, but life expands. Self-reconstruction is the process of replacing guilt with awareness, of understanding that loving doesn't mean allowing everything, that forgiveness doesn't require reconnection, and that silence is not punishment, it's home. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "He who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe," and that harmony begins now. When you realize that there is nothing wrong with choosing peace, with prioritizing your own balance, with walking alone if necessary. During this process, something inside you changes place. The need for approval dies. The fear of being misunderstood dissolves, and the guilt, which previously accompanied you in every decision, finally falls silent. What remains is a feeling of silent maturity, the certainty that peace no longer depends on the behavior of others. Reconstructing yourself is relearning to trust your own presence. It's looking in the mirror and recognizing someone who survived without becoming bitter. It's realizing that you still feel love, only now, with distance and discernment. And understanding that detachment was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new way of loving, calmer, wiser, cleaner. Reconstruction is the stage in which the Stoic and the human finally meet. Reason and affection stop fighting and start walking side by side. There is no longer a need to cut, because now, what doesn't serve you simply doesn't reach you. In the end, you realize that cutting ties was never about hate. It was about preserving what is still left of love, even if it is from a distance. Because true love, the one that matures, understands that physical presence is not synonymous with connection. There are relationships that only become pure again when the space between people grows enough to fit respect. Seneca said that nothing is nobler than the soul that remains faithful to its own peace. And that's what you conquer when you get here. It's not indifference, it's serenity. It's not contempt, it's acceptance. It's understanding that some people simply cannot walk alongside you in the current stage of your evolution, and that's okay. The love that remains at a distance is the one that no longer needs to prove anything. It doesn't demand an answer, nor a return. It just wishes well, but from afar, in silence. It's the love that frees itself from the need to fix the other and starts to take care only of its own balance. Think of all the people who have been part of your story. Some hurt you, others shaped you, all taught you. And if you got here, it's because you finally understood that maturity is not erasing the past. It's not allowing it to dictate the present. Reconstruction ends when peace becomes natural, when silence ceases to be effort and becomes rest, when you can think of the name of someone who hurt you and feel nothing, neither anger nor longing, just gratitude for the learning. This is the sign that the soul has healed. Epictetus wrote, "Things do not change, we change." And cutting ties is exactly that. The world remains the same, but now it is you who sees differently. That same environment that previously made you sick today no longer affects you because awareness has built a wall of peace around your mind. Love at a distance is purified love. It doesn't want to reconnect, it just wants to let it exist. It doesn't desire presence, just balance. And perhaps this is the noblest of loves, the one that wishes well even knowing that the path needs to continue separately. So, if you got here, maybe you are already at this point in the journey. Maybe you have someone in mind, someone who was important, but that time taught you to love from afar. If that's your case, just take a deep breath and say, mentally, I release you, and I release myself too. Love no longer needs coexistence to be true. It only needs awareness to remain pure. And that's the peace that the Stoics sought. The harmony between the heart that feels and the reason that understands. If this message touched you, subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about the silent battles, those that happen inside and that no one sees. And tell me, in which of these 5 levels do you believe you are today? Perhaps the simple act of recognizing is already the first step to heal.